Now you got Secure 2.0. We talk about massive shifts in legislation that's impacting retirees.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I am here today with my good friend, co-host for these Friday editions of the podcast. Got Marshall here with me.
Hey.
Marshall, and we are going to talk about some stuff today, aren't we? Just like we do every Friday. This is our opportunity to talk about stuff, but not just any stuff. This is our opportunity to cover with you things that we think are trending that are also important to you. And we call this our weekend reading for retirees. So every week we put an email in front of you with 4 articles on trending topics, all designed to help you make better decisions about your finances. Then we like to pull out one of those articles and dive a bit deeper here with you in the podcast. And you can get a link to this particular article right there in our show notes at retirewithpurpose.com. Sign up for the weekend reading email while you're there. It's not just an article email. You'll get the articles, but you'll also get takeaways, breakdowns, summaries, white papers, webinar invitations, special events, all kinds of great stuff. Book giveaways, and you can also sign up by just shooting us a text. Text the key letters WR to 866-482-9559. We'll send you a link to get yourself signed up moving forward. So this week, we decided to talk Secure Act 2.0 or Secure 2.0.
Secure 2.0. I love it. We had 1.0 a few years ago, right? So this is a revision of.
I don't know why the 0.0 is so important.
Like
there's only 2 of them.
Yeah, there's just 1 and 2. It's like.
Yeah, make it sound like a good piece of technology or something here. I mean, the reality is that this is a lot to consume. It doesn't feel like there's much there at the surface level. And I think when the Secure Act 1.0 originally came out, there really was not that much going on. I think it kind of fell flat. This one is not just building upon the original Secure Act, but it does have layers of complexity to it. And I believe that this is something that will impact your planning. I think we're going to see a lot of IRS rulings in the years to come because there's a lot of there's a sincere lack of clarity in the bill that was passed as well. We sifted through all kinds of articles. I mean, dozens of different articles and locations to try to find the best article to put in front of you, because what I found is a lot of these articles that you're seeing on CNBC or Kiplinger, even the Wall Street Journal, they're just starting to scratch the surface, and they're leaving big chunks out that we believe that you need to be aware of. So what we ended up doing was going with something a little bit different for this week. We went with a legal article, a legal alert that does a great job of breaking down the Secure Act 2.0 in 2023 and beyond, and that is aptly named Secure 2.0 in 2023 and beyond. And it is coming to us from news and commentary provided by Eversheds and Sutherland. Now, what we did is we read this, and we also read a bunch of other articles and took a look at the bill, and we took all of our takeaways, and we just want to integrate those things for you, because I don't think there's an article out there that's doing the average retiree justice that says, hey, this is what you need to be paying attention to, because they're cramming a lot of other things in there that maybe don't apply to you, and a lot of things that are relatively insignificant that maybe need to be brought to the surface, just how insignificant this is, or just how important this is.
Yeah, how important. I mean, you talk about taxes, and we look at the House and the Senate for 2023, and we think with the gridlock, we're not going to see a lot of major initiatives on the tax side.
I mean, they just spent $2 trillion, so.
But on the flip side, I mean, you look back and just look at the Tax Cuts and Jobs.
Take a breather.
Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. You got the Secure 1.0. Now you got Secure 2.0. We talk about massive shifts in legislation that's impacting retirees. And that was the point of Secure Act, right? It was setting every community up for retirement enhancement. That's what Secure stands for. So there's a lot of changes here to the retirement terms and accounts that almost everybody is using in one form or another. So it does have deep implications that will impact how planners prepare and how individuals prepare their retirement.
Yeah, and that was the first major change we saw in the U.S. retirement system in more than a decade.
Long time.
And what was the biggest thing that I feel like came out of that? Change in RMDH?
Yeah, that was the headline, right? RMDs are getting pushed back from 70 and a half back to 72. That's what stole the headlines. And I always warn my clients, when the headline is about something that sounds seemingly seemingly good. There's probably a lot of stuff in there that they didn't want you to see. They're going to let that be the headline. And here we go again, 2.0. We're going to push those RMDs back.
Secure Act was largely joked about being securing the future of the IRS, right? I mean,
securing more tax revenue.
Because there wasn't a lot of really honestly good things. There were a lot of things that were camouflaged as really good things for retirees, but in general there wasn't that much that made a significant impact, but it could make a significant impact to the negative, that being pushing back RMD ages. I think many saw, oh great, I don't have to take a distribution for a couple more years. Right. That just means your distributions are going to be even bigger, pushing you into an even higher tax bracket, maybe even exiting the marginal tax bracket you were going to be in and making it an even higher tax rate that you're going to pay in those required distributions in the future.
And not to mention forcing your non-spouse beneficiaries to pay those taxes over a shorter window of time, not their lifetime. How about 10 years?
Now you need to take out all of the balance of those IRAs that you inherit over 10 years, which is probably during the peak of your earning years. So what do you do? I mean, we joke about it sometimes, but, well, maybe I'll just take a couple years off so that I don't have to take as much taxable income, so that I actually net more dollars. Can I just take a sabbatical for the next year or two while I take these distributions? A tax sabbatical. Yeah. No, and so some of them that are relatively insignificant for the employer, but I could see how they could be. You could see these as significant if maybe you're not working in it on a daily basis. One of those things being requiring automatic 401k enrollment. Like that, is that significant, right? I mean, a lot of 401k providers are already doing automatic enrollment. Where I see this being, I don't see this being very significant.
I feel like this was a group. I feel like this was a group of policymakers sitting around going, "Well, we need people to save more. How are we going to do that?" And then somebody over here said, let's make it automatic. Let's make them do it. It's automatic.
Yeah, just
that'll
force
work.
them to do it.
Yeah, that'll be good. They love forced distributions in retirement. Let's force them to contribute in their accumulation years.
Yeah, and that rate has to be at least 3%. And that's a significant amount of money for your average American, no more than 10%. I mean, that means that they could be setting it up at 10%, right? You could be defaulting into that at 10%. And I don't, this doesn't apply to anybody that's not a medium to large size business. It doesn't apply to businesses with 10 or fewer employees in business for less than 3 years. Where I see it being a headache is for the employers, certain employers, depending on the makeup of their workforce. Yeah. For instance, I've worked with employers that run large manufacturing companies, and they do not want automatic enrollment because of the headache and time that it takes the administration to administer that plan, because now they have people that are getting notified that they're getting pushed, they're going to be automatically enrolled into the 401k. These people don't want to be enrolled in the 401k. They want every single dollar that they can get out of that.
They need every single dollar.
Yeah, they need it. And so, but they missed the email, they missed the mail notification, and now they're enrolled. Then they get upset with their employer. They go back to HR, say, hey, I want my money back. So then there's a headache for HR.
Administrative cost of opting them out.
They have much higher turnover rates. So maybe they're only there for a year, 6 months. And because of those turnover rates, they're constantly having to process distributions from those 401ks. So I think largely that's going to be relatively insignificant for your average worker. I think it's going to be more significant for your average 401k provider. And we already mentioned increasing RMD age, right?
Yeah, pushing the RMD age back to 75. This is one that gets a lot of the headlines, Casey, and people go, oh, great, I don't have to worry about it till I'm 75. But as we've talked in the past, don't let those years go by. Sometimes those are the best years between, say, 65 and 75, especially if your income has dropped because you've retired. These are the best planning years, and maybe this actually opens up a wonderful opportunity for a lot of individuals that are retiring in their mid-60s.
It does, because when you hit RMD age, most people, what I find, they stop doing Roth conversions altogether because typically the amount that they wanted to do in a Roth conversion, now they have to take in a required distribution. Sure. You cannot convert your required minimum distribution to a Roth IRA. You have to take that as ordinary income. Now it does buy you more time to do Roth conversions. That's the best part about this. This year it increases to age 73, and it'll increase to age 75 by 2033. This is actually, believe it or not, arguably the biggest tax revenue increase that you're going to find in this bill. And that is due to analysis that's been done around penalties for failing to take your required minimum distributions. That penalty has historically been 50%. You forget to take your required distribution, you're going to have to pay taxes on that distribution plus a 50% tax penalty. And what's that mean? That means we take those RMDs, right? We don't miss an RMD. You take that thing every single time. Now that penalty is going to be 25%. However, it could also be 10%. 10% in the case of you correcting it within 2 years. So where they feel that this will be a big tax revenue increase, one, sure, has to do with the delaying of RMDs. You got people that are going to do Roth conversions, or they're just going to have larger RMDs. But where they're really focusing in on is that now people will look at those penalties that were 50% and go, it's not that big a deal. It's just, it's not as significant as it once was, which means they expect to collect more in the way of penalties, not less. And I know that's counterintuitive. We reduce the penalty, but we expect to actually create more tax revenue out of it. If it's corrected, it used to go away. Right now, it's corrected, you still pay 10%. If you'd like to take the information that you've gleaned here to the next level, all you have to do is this. Click the link in the description and schedule a 15-minute phone consultation with an advisor on our team where you can get answers to your own unique questions and concerns. Yeah, then you have larger catch-up contributions. That's great. You can put an extra, currently you can put an extra $6,500 in your 401k once you get to 50. Now the Secure 2.0 is going to increase that limit to $10,000 or 50% more than your regular catch-up amount, starting in 2025. For savers age 60 to 63. So
60 to 63.
Darn it, we talk about all these really important ages that a retiree has to remember. I mean, it's already really complicated for planning for retirement. And it's just like taxes. Every time they say this is going to get better, it just gets more complicated, which also creates more planning opportunities, which is the good part that comes out of that. Right. But we used to have to remember 55, then we have to remember 59 and a half, then we've got to remember 62, then 65, then 67. Then 70, then 72. Now we have more numbers to worry about. Now, hey, throw in 60 to 63.
Yeah, and they threw a twist. They threw a twist in there too, right? Like if your income is over $145,000, it must be treated as a Roth contribution, which means you're paying the tax. The catch-up contribution means you're paying the taxes on it at that time. And a lot of those individuals, Casey, are in their highest earning years, so that again will increase tax revenue.
Yeah, and we have increase that's not going to affect the majority of our audience, and that would be broadening employer 401k match options to say, hey, if you're paying down a student loan, then we can match that amount, right, into your 401k.
Yeah, I think that's cool, right? Like they're creating some outs, right? Some leeway, trying to help, as they said in the bill, every community, right? They're trying to help everybody across that spectrum.
Yeah, and then we have improving worker access to emergency savings. So kind of an interesting one here, right? We've had hardship distributions in the past, so we know how hardship distributions work most likely. Right. And now we have something else. In addition to that, we have access to emergency savings. And applying for a hardship distribution was relatively complex. And this is going to be much simpler, where you're just self-certifying to your employer, hey, I had an emergency, or my family had an emergency. Well, now I can withdraw up to $1,000 from my retirement account without having to pay any tax penalties pre-59.5, that 10% penalty tax. We can avoid the 10% penalty tax. You're still paying taxes on the distribution, but you're avoiding the 10% penalty tax, and you're able to do this every year. However, you've got to repay it every year if you're going to do it every year. So you have, and this starts in 2024, where if I take $1,000 out, then I don't pay that $1,000 back, then I can do it every 3 years. If I take the $1,000 out and repay it every year, then I can do it every year. So.
Well, and I think it's good too. I mean, all these statistics always say like the average family can't handle a $500 surprise expense.
And so they don't contribute to a retirement account.
So they don't contribute to the retirement account. So you're trying to create both sides of the equation.
Yeah, they have increasing part-time workers access to retirement accounts. So we saw that come out of the Secure Act. We're just including more and more people that are part-time workers into retirement account eligibility, 401k eligibility. Yep. So part-time workers who book between 500 to 999 hours for 3 consecutive years could be eligible for their employer's 401k. The Secure Act 2.0 keeps that eligibility. It just reduces that from 3 consecutive years to 2 consecutive years of work to grant eligibility for 401k contributions.
Yeah, that's great. I love it, especially for college kids or people that are working on a limited capacity and still have extra money to save. It's wonderful.
Ooh, QLACs.
Woo!
I remember when years ago the first QLAC
Like, it sounds
provisions
really
came
cool.
out, and I was
Yeah,
like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be the coolest thing ever!" Qualified longevity annuity contract, great. So now we have a new planning opportunity where we can take a chunk of someone's IRA, set it aside in this annuity contract, meaning that they no longer have to take required minimum distributions from that account,
right?
So they can defer this into the future, so that they can have a lifetime income from that account some point in the future. However, I don't think with all the legislation that's been passed, they've created any decent products as a result.
It's every time we've looked at it in certain situations, I've yet to run into a circumstance where it actually made sense for somebody to do.
Yeah, the tax ramifications on the back end are just devastating for the individual, and the returns along the way are even worse for the amount of liquidity that you're giving up. There should always be a trade-off between liquidity and rate of return. The more liquidity you give up, the better rate of return you should get, and there should be a substantial difference. One of the things that's going to make that even more difficult today is the expectation of lower rates in the future now. You know, we have borderline an inverted yield curve, right? Mm-hmm. And that means
definitely
that
not even borderline anymore, right? Yeah. It's definitely inverted.
And then we have a federal matching contribution for lower income retirement savers. So
love that.
That's kind of cool. Be interesting to see how it actually works in practice. So I put money into my Roth IRA, then I should be able to get a 50% match up to $2,000 of income. So that's a $1,000 matching contribution. That's huge, right? Yeah. Especially for the individuals we're talking about. This is a larger phase out than the earned income credit or the savers credit, being that it's going to be phased out between $41,000 and $71,000 for a couple. That is a significantly larger group of individuals that are going to be eligible for this matching contribution, and it's a larger phase-out window. However, I'm just interested to see how it works in practice, where the IRS is going to make a contribution to my retirement account. But I think that's what is going to come out of so many of these provisions. Is there's going to be many subsequent tax rulings. We're going to have white papers written about this stuff.
Stay tuned, right? That's what when I look at all this, we've got to a few of it, but there's a few more. We just look at how this is actually going to work in practice for the payroll systems, for the employers, for the employees, for the individuals in this scenario, just like this one. Who's going to be educating at this level? Who's going to be educating individuals on how to take advantage of this? Is it going to be taught in school? Is it going to be taught in finance class in college? It's like probably not. So how is the education going to disseminate to the individuals that need to hear about it?
Yeah, the layers of complexity create a system that is unequal, right? If we have more complexity in our tax and in the tax system, and many times the complexity that's layered into the tax system has some good intention to benefit a younger individual or a lower income earner. However, what really happens is that is just creating greater income inequality, because the wealthier individuals, the more educated individuals, are the ones that have the ability or wherewithal to take advantage of the new provisions and benefit from those things. I see the same thing going on here from a retirement legislation standpoint, where it goes, the reality is if you just made all of this a lot simpler so that everyone could understand it and consume it, that would be the greatest thing that you could do to benefit retirement savers. Now, that's just my own personal political philosophy that I don't want to impart on anyone here, but that's what I see happening. I mean, look at 529 plans. How often is this going to be missed for your average individual, your average person that's just saving money into a 529, trying to save for their kids' education so that they can go to college someday, maybe the way they didn't get to? Are they going to miss out on the 529 Roth conversion provisions, where a wealthier individual that's maybe a grandparent, didn't need the money as bad, they're going to be the ones that end up benefiting from this the most.
Well, and I hope too, what comes out of this is a lot of parents are not saving or not taking advantage of maxing out 529s in the past because they thought, well, what if my son or daughter doesn't go to college, or I don't want to put too much money in there in case they do something different than what I think they may do. Well, now there's a provision that's going to allow that 529 to be rolled over to a Roth IRA into the name of the beneficiary.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I think this is great stuff. I mean, this is great stuff. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I think the layers of complexity are a burden for a lot of individuals out there that maybe can't access the information or can't pay for someone to do the planning for them. Mm-hmm. So for a 529 plan, and the plan's at least 15 years old, but let's say that you want to take the money that's in that 529 and put it into a Roth IRA, it's going to be subject to a maximum of $35,000. And this is the problem with a lot of the articles that I see out there being written about these different topics is it looks like, oh, it's just limited by $35,000. Great, I'm going to roll over $35,000. Mm-hmm. Don't miss that it's limited not just by $35,000, but the Roth contribution limits as well.
Yeah, right. So you're only going to be able to do a limited amount every year, but there's an option, right? I've met families over the years that had a bunch of money left in 529s, or even came out of a divorce and they got part of the 529. It's like those individuals were kind of stuck within the limitations of outdated rules. So at least we're thinking ahead.
When you had to dig kind of deep to figure out how to do this, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's many individuals that'll go, well, I'm just going to have to go this on my own, and I guess I can get to roll this over to my kid's Roth. Mm-hmm. Yeah? And whereas if they change the beneficiary to their own name, they could have rolled it over to their own Roth.
Yeah, there's where you talk about maybe the educated abuses of legislation that may not have been intended that direction. And maybe there's going to come some guidance that comes out of this, but I think there's such gray area. Anytime you change the tax law, you're going to have a lot of gray area. We saw, Michael Kitces pointed out that the RMD provisions, there's a typo in there. So it looks like somebody that's born in 1959 has to either begin taking distributions at 74 or 75. They fit into both those categories. So I think there'll be revisions that correct those dates. But that's kind of concerning when you've got typos in legislation like this that could impact every individual born in a certain calendar year.
I mean, what I love is that simple IRAs and SEP IRAs, you can now do Roth.
We're seeing the Rothification of retirement savings.
I've advised against people setting up simple IRAs because they need to be making Roth contributions, right? Yep. And now that we can set up a SEP or a simple and we can contribute on a Roth basis, I think that might be one of my favorite pieces of this legislation. And Roth catch-up requirements as well. So Roth IRA catch-up contribution requirements will not be for SEP or simple. We won't have Roth catch-up requirements of $145,000 for SEP or simple. That's really going to fall into the 401k category.
Yeah, that's pretty neat, expanding those accounts that are typically used by self-employed individuals that may not have the employees or the need to create 401ks. Now this gives
what stinks?
Them what does?
What kind of stinks is those individuals that were getting those putting in those catch-up contributions because they're getting close to retirement. Now they cannot put those in traditional IRA in the peak of their earning years. Mm-hmm. Right. Peak of their earning years, they go, great, I get these catch-up contributions. I can defer even more dollars into my 401k.
They have to be after tax.
Now it has to be after tax for individuals earning more than $145,000. That is another area of the bill where you're going to see some of the biggest tax revenue that's going to be created. And I think wrap up with this, QCDs.
QCDs, one of my favorite tools, right? We've seen these explode over the years as we've gotten rid of the standard deduction, or we've gotten rid of itemized deductions for a lot of households. QCDs have become a big part of charitable giving in retirement.
Just a mainstay, right? It's something that I mean, we're using on almost a daily basis for someone, or at least having that discussion with someone around qualified charitable distributions. Reach RMD age, great. We're going to, instead of having to take those required distributions, why don't we go ahead and move those things directly into, a charitable organization. And some people would say, well, what if I want to move that into a charitable trust? And those things weren't allowed. So now they're, not only did they index the amount for inflation, that $100,000 maximum each year that you can do, over and above your required minimum distribution, you can do up to $100,000. That's indexed for inflation now, and you can also take $50,000 and move it to what would normally not be considered a qualified charitable organization, such as a charitable gift annuity, a charitable remainder annuity trust, a charitable remainder unit trust. And at first look, this is one of those things. I go, oh man, this is really cool. Now we have someone that comes in, they've got a concentrated stock position as a significant chunk of their investable assets. So they're taking too much risk. They want to pare down this position, but it's going to cost them too much in taxes. We take that, move it over to a charitable remainder annuity. Now we can liquidate those funds and reinvest them without any tax ramifications upon the investment reallocation.
Right.
So now they don't get hit with those taxes. And as it comes back to them, it's going to be taxed in whatever form it's invested. So maybe it's invested in tax-free bonds, for instance. And now I say, well, great, we could just bolster that by taking an extra $50,000 from someone's IRA and move it into that charitable remainder annuity trust or charitable remainder trust. And now we could ultimately get that $50,000 out tax-free. Well, it's always going to, this is where I go, oh, bummer, read the fine print. The $50,000 that's moved out of there is going to retain the tax qualification as if it was in an IRA still, meaning that you're going to pay taxes at ordinary income tax rates as those dollars come back to you. So, well, don't see that one using.
Yeah, much to do about nothing there, I think, on the crats and the cruts.
Yeah, so check out the link in the article. There are a lot more line items that you can go through and dive deeper into if you'd like. Again, just check it out in the show notes. Dive in deeper there. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them.